Our department it's a proactive department. We like to go out and try to prevent crimes before they happen instead of just responding to crimes. We're innovative, trend setting. We take care of the small things, and we like to think that we solve problems when we go out there to calls on the first time. And we like to think that we are a full service department. But what I'm going to show you tonight is making it more and more challenging to meet our mission, to meet our goals. It's becoming more difficult with the resources we have, and I just felt obligated to come and speak before you and kind of let you guys know, and as well as the community, kind of where we stand today. So tonight, just a brief overview of what I'm going to cover is we had a staffing study that was conducted back in 2006 under then Chief Jim Zolam. We used that same company in 2021 and just completed that most recent staffing study this month, and that's what you have, that 50-page document there. I'm also going to look at the budget just briefly over the past 15 years, kind of some of the challenges that we face with our budget, and then impacts on staffing levels and what those impacts have had on the community as well as our department. And then I'm going to tell you just quite honestly what we need today to be where we should be, and what we'll need over the next 5 years to be what I think to provide the service levels that we need for our department in our city. So I'm going to start back in 2006, and really this presentation is going to cover the last 15 years. So Chief Zolam at that time started a staffing study, and he wanted to look, what do we need for our community here in Clovis? It's not just 1.3 per capita or 1.6 of our neighbors next door in Fresno. What do we need here in Clovis? So he thought outside the box, and at the time, this was a nationally recognized model on doing data analysis of departments to find out what resources each department needs. And so he undertook the services of Edco Solutions and Tim Friesmeyer, and they did about a year-long study on the department. And I know Councilmember Bessinger, I think, was a sergeant at that time, and it was a long process. And I'm not going to go through all of what happened back then, but the ultimate study provided the results that the department, the patrol division, the study only looked at the patrol division, was understaffed and needed about 18 additional officers at that time. At the time, the city council, I wasn't here, I just started in 2006, so I was just trying to get familiar with the department at that time. But I know Councilmember Flores, Mayor Flores was on the council at that time, Councilmember Ashback and Councilmember Whalen were all on the council at that time, and firsthand saw that presentation. And my understanding is council agreed with what was presented at that time and made some policy decisions that additional funds were dedicated to the department, because at that time the department grew up to 119 budgeted positions, and we got up to 117 shortly after I got here. But we all know that the bubble burst and the market crashed in 2008, and from that point on it's kind of the results of today of where we've come to where we're at today. So why I chose to do the same study 15 years later, I thought it was a valuable study back then. It would be a valuable study today to have the same company come back 15 years later and look at our department. Just to kind of explain why this data-driven study I think is probably the most valuable in determining staffing models. There's really 5 other ways departments have historically did it, and I'll just talk about those real briefly. Some departments look at crime trends, and crime's growing up. We need to throw some more officers at the police department to get more officers out there to bring crime down. But if you think about that, you're rewarding a department that's probably either maybe they are staffed appropriately but just not doing a good job, and then vice versa, if crime's going down or crime's steady, and you don't give them any additional staffing as the population grows. So you kind of got to look at it: are we rewarding a poorly performing department, or are we punishing the ones that are doing a good job? And I've historically heard as being the chief of Clovis, is you guys are victims of your own success. And I truly believe our department does an amazing job with the resources we have. But we definitely know we can do better, and we definitely want to do better at this point. Another approach is per capita and that's how many officers per 1,000. And I'm going to show you that a little bit later to show you where we fall, because it is a good judge of determining how you compare to other agencies. But it's not a one-size-fits-all. Every community has their different challenges. Some are larger than others. Some have higher crime rates. So some just need different staffing. So it's not really the best approach, in my opinion. And then minimum staffing levels. What is the minimum amount of officers that you need to staff the street with? To me, that's the wrong approach. We're just responding to calls. We're not being proactive. We're not doing any community-based policing. Those are the things we don't want to do. But I'll tell you, that's where we're at right now. We are bare minimum amount of staffing on our streets, providing the minimum amount that we have. And I'll clearly show you where we're at. Lastly, another one is authorized budget level. It's a financially fiduciary responsibility, and it's probably the best, is we only pay what we can afford. But all crime, depending, if we can only afford so much and crime level is going out of control, we need to figure out something different, to do something different. So I definitely don't agree that that's the best one to take place. So what we did is the work-based model in 2021, and that's the study you have there in front of you. And what this looked at is strictly our patrol division. We wanted to do apples to apples to what they did in 2006. This is based on the PAM model, which is the Police Allocation Manual, which was developed at Northwestern University for their Center for Public Safety and is nationally recognized. So Tim, actually, the consultant, actually was a professor at Northwestern, developed this with other professors, and they have gone on over the last 25 years and done this at multiple police agencies throughout the country. So what we found in our study, Tim came in and got 5 years of CAD data, which is a computer that we use. When a call comes into dispatch, the dispatcher enters it into the computer system, gets sent to the officer out in the patrol car, and that's considered our CAD system. So he took 5 years of call data, got sent to him, did all the analysis on that. That includes GPS locations, calls, how long we spent on a call, how many officers did they take to handle that call, and crunched all this. I can't sit here and try to analyze and give you all the specifics. As part of the contract, Tim will be more than happy to come in here and explain and answer any questions that you have. So if you have detailed, specific questions to this study, I'll try my best, but Tim would be more than happy to come in. So really, what the study came down to, and if you read through there, you can read the executive and the kind of the finding at the end, but it found that our department is significantly understaffed in the patrol division. Currently, right now, this PAM model looks at a 30-30 split, so out of an officer's day, or out of an hour, how much time does an officer have reactive and how much time is proactive? And they want a 30-minute split, so 30 minutes of proactive time, 30 minutes of reactive time. The study found that our department, our officers, are 42 minutes of their day is consumed with responding to calls, and 18 minutes of time is proactive. So what that breaks down to is we're becoming oversaturated with calls. We're becoming more of a reactive agency. Once you get to a certain saturation level, Tim finds that 8 officers will go in service and just kind of wait for the next call instead of going out and pulling traffic stops and being proactive and doing those community contacts. So he found that we needed 18 to 22 additional bodies in our patrol division to get to that 30-30 split. And that's not taking into account all the reductions in our investigative unit and all the other things that I'll kind of talk about here shortly. So this is a comparison of 2006 and then 15 years later to today. So our population has increased over 43% in that time period, and our department staffing of sworn officers has decreased by 4% over that last 15-year period of time. If you use the same per capita rating that we were back in 2006, and this is not when we're at 117 sworn, I didn't sneak that in there. I used 110 what they were in 2006. And the per capita was 1.25 at that time. If you took that per capita rating at that time and brought it out today, we would have 51 additional officers than we do. At that time on patrol, we had dedicated call takers. As part of Tim's study is how many people do you have in patrol that are responding to calls? That's community service officers, K-9 officers, corporals and our traffic division all responding to calls. And at that time they had 60. Today we have 68. So you might be confused on chief, you're telling me you have less officers, how do you have more in patrol? And I'm going to talk about how that's happened. But we've had to reallocate resources to staff patrol, because patrol is the core function of our department. And when you call, we respond and we get there in a hurry. So to compare to 2001 and 2006, I took this directly out of Chief Zolam's master service plan. On one of his pages, he talked about units outside of patrol, and he noted, and I'm going to read this out of his master plan. He said on page 28 of his, which you don't have, but I'm just going to read it. 1974, we had 4 detectives. And in 2005, after 31 years and 327% increase in population, the unit only grew to 8. As you can see up there, they had 8 at the time for investigations. Narcotics 4, gang 4, and so on. This is where we are today. So 47 years later, 510% increase in population, we're still at 8 detectives. Minus 4 narcotics, minus 8 in our gang unit, minus 3 in youth services, and minus 1 in MAGIC. I will tell you though, the gang and narcotic unit was combined to create our SED unit, but there's only 3 officers and a sergeant dedicated to that unit. So that tells you where those bodies have gone to supplement patrol. They're coming out of these specialized units that we use to be proactive in solving crime before it happens instead of being reactive. So additional cuts that have taken place over the last 15 years. These are proactive units. On the bottom, those are the ones they eliminated. They're ones I kind of just covered. These are a lot of proactive programs, preventative programs that we've had to eliminate since then. I'll just kind of read through. So a little bit like the investigations caseload. Detectives, we only have 8. Our population is expanding. Calls are coming in more. We're starting to have to prioritize what cases we're responding to or taking on and to investigate. It was very rare when I was in detectives that we would ever suspend a case that had leads to follow up on. We routinely suspend cases that have leads to follow up on because we have to prioritize what's the most important, what's the most largest loss, what's the most violent crime, and those are the things we're working. And a lot of other cases are going without being investigated fully. Our SAFER program was a domestic violence program that we identified victims of domestic violence, reached out to them, and brought them into a kind of a counseling session and resource gathering to connect them. Today we're really relying on other agencies like Marjorie Mason and not doing that so much in-house. We used to have somebody on the FBI task force. We no longer have that. And a lot of these in the middle here, transient, municipal code enforcement, bar details, a lot of these have been reduced. Juvenile operations, a lot of our juvenile youth services and counseling have been reduced, if not eliminated. PAL and DARE have been completely eliminated. And then the rest there, community watch, community events, community outreach have been reduced here in the last couple of years especially. So this one, I just want to talk a little bit about budget. This is represents the last 15 years of our budget, and I just wanted to state that our budget has consistently grown with the size of the city's budget. Proportionally, as the city's budget grows, ours grows consistently the same. It's not that we're being shorted or you guys aren't dedicating the funding. This is not what I'm saying at all. Proportionally, though, of our budget, these additional costs have increased disproportionately. So our health insurance is now, instead of taking up 5%, which it did 15 years ago, 6% of our budget is now going towards health care. General services has increased by 3% of our budget. And our PERS costs, our retirement costs have gone up an additional 3%. Our salaries, on the other hand, have what monies are dedicated to our salaries have actually decreased by 3%. So if you kind of add all those up, it's about a 10% change in where our money in our budget is going to. If all that was able to be dedicated towards salaries, it potentially could add another 23 officers to our department. So if we could realize the money that we have currently, we could do a lot more with it. but because of costs that are outside of our control, our budget is going less and less towards personnel, and we're obviously a heavily personnel-driven department, and so it makes it difficult when we're not able to realize that.
You know what, Chief, I need you to repeat
Sure.
that last part. So you mentioned if health remained at 5%, general services remained at 7%, and PERS remained at 10%, did you say you'd have the ability to fund 130 officers? Did I hear that correctly?
I was saying that if you add those up, that's 7% right there, along with the 3% on this side of our salaries that have decreased. That's 10% of our budget that's not going to salaries that used to. And if you took it back further, we went back 25 years, 17% of our salary used to be more was dedicated to salaries. To today, it went to 4, so it used to be 57.9% of our budget went to salaries. Today, it's 40% of our overall budget goes towards salaries. So that's because of additional increased costs that, like I kind of pointed out here today. There's some other costs, like now we have our own CAD system, Axon body cameras and tasers and all the technology equipment we have. Some of the camera infrastructure that we've increased our budget on over the last couple of years. All that's taken away from the proportion of money that we can put towards salaries, is what I was kind of trying to point out here.
Thank you.
So recently in the last 2 years, because of resignations, let me find my story here. Because of retirements, resignations, and some workers' comp injuries that we've kind of experienced here in the last year and a half, we've had to make some additional cuts. So our proactive operations, I'll tell you right now, we're trying to put out juvenile operations. We're having some juvenile issues at Willow Station and some other places with vehicles racing is a big thing that people are calling and complaining about. We'll put out an overtime operation and page out to see if anybody's interested, and people just aren't answering up anymore. And that is not typical of our department, but because of all the overtime that's been put out to fill patrol spots, people are becoming exhausted, and it's affecting our proactive operations. Our special enforcement team is that team that I talked about. We combined our narcs and game team to 3 and 1. It used to be 4 and 1. But we recently had to take an additional detective off of that unit. Our magic spot is vacated right now. Investigations, we had to take another detective out of there to supplement patrol. Our traffic unit for a size city of 122,000, we have 2 traffic officers. And one of them, honestly, is a supervisor that's approving reports, is managing grants that we have, is taking care of all the equipment, doing tow impound hearings. Half his day is filled up with administrative duties. So we really have one person out there dedicated to traffic enforcement, which is definitely not the way we want to go. Planning neighborhood services, we have 3 in there. 2 of them are currently supplementing patrol. Half their week is they're coming in halfway through the day, putting on a uniform and going out and supplementing patrol. Because we're short right now. Dispatch supervisor, we used to have a corporal that oversaw that. They're currently out on patrol, and we have a member of command staff overseeing our dispatch center. So succession planning, I put that on there because it makes my job extremely difficult. If I don't have the ability to promote people and get the future leadership of the department ready to go, I'm in a position right now where I can't promote sergeants. I can't promote people into command staff because every time I promote one of those personnel, it's taking a body off the street that can respond to calls. So we're just going short, which is never good when you have less supervisors than you should out there on the streets. I'm a good example of, I went from an officer to the chief of police in 7 years. That's not good succession planning for leadership for the future. I'm not talking down that I'm not doing a good job, but I'm saying it's not really the ideal situation. It makes it difficult. So I just wanted to add that in. And then the adult compliance team, which is the ACT team, we have 2 positions that are fully grant funded with equipment, insurance costs, workers' comp, everything's tied in there. It's completely paid for. We had to pull both of those bodies because we're tech short and staffing control. So we're giving up two fully funded positions right now that are vacated. So these cuts over the last 15 years, what impacts have they had on our community and our department? And that's kind of what I want to talk about in these next few slides. So and a lot of this is going to be over the last, taking place over the last 6 months to a year, because I didn't want to put things out or happened a long time ago. So recently downtown we had a double homicide at one of our bars. I don't want to tell you 100%, but I can tell you very confidently that if we were doing the things that we were doing 15 years ago, this would likely have not occurred. We routinely would do bars where we would go down there and do bar checks. This is all alcohol establishments in town. We would do routine walkthroughs, make sure security's properly wearing the stuff they're supposed to, and doing all the things that they're supposed to. They're shutting down the bars at certain times. I know everybody in here can remember back Clovis Avenue at 1:32 in the morning. If you've been out there, they would have cars out there with the lights on, letting everybody know the party's over, it's time to go home, and sending people, making sure they had taxis and Ubers or whatever to get out of there safely. And we're not doing that today. And I can almost guarantee, I won't guarantee, but I can almost say that I'm confident that this likely would not have happened if we're doing those same things today. So our DARE and PAL programs have been eliminated for, I think, ever since I've been here. I did a couple of years, I think it was going on, probably 2008. And we're just not doing the engagement in the schools. We're not doing any of the drug education. And it really starts with the youth and doing that education. And we're not doing it. Typically in the past, the corporals were the chiefs of their beats, and they would go out to every elementary school during Red Ribbon Week and talk about drugs and be a part of the school's program. We're not doing it. I went out personally with Lieutenant Monroe. We hit up a school. I think one of our other officers hit another school, but we're not hitting every school like we have in the past. And all that has an impact. Our overdoses in the last 2 years have increased by 15%. We currently have 3 deaths this year directly related to overdoses. So I just know there's so much more that we can do and we want to do. Domestic violence. We've had a couple here in the last several months, tragedies related to domestic violence. I'm not saying this is something that we can prevent, but it's definitely something we can educate. We can identify when crimes occur at a lower level before it gets to the violent level, and we can get people into a support group, into resources, and put in an effort to try to identify those people. We're not doing that here today anymore. And then fatal accident, typically our fatal accidents are more than our homicides. Last year we had 5, this year we already have 4. With a traffic unit of 2 traffic officers, and the city this size, we're not making an impact. We're not out there issuing citations. We have a number of people calling routinely telling us about speeders in different locations throughout the city, and they're doing the best they can. Typically, we like to think everybody's a traffic officer in our department, but when 47 minutes or 42 minutes of your day are tied up with responding to calls, we can't go out and enforce the traffic laws. These are the things that, when I came to Clovis, these are the things that Clovis was different. And I learned the culture of Clovis and grew up. You would never see this in our city. This is taken a couple months ago in one of our alleyways. And it's not the city of Clovis, and it makes it extremely frustrating. This is behind an apartment complex in our city. This is a homeless encampment that we're working on cleaning up. Just graffiti is one thing we stay on top of. We're covering this stuff up immediately, but it's constantly occurring within the city. So how are these impacts affecting us as far as our department versus the community? We have a lot of development going on, and I'm going to talk about a few big developments within our city that are commercial. I'm not saying they're bad by any means, but they're great. They're things that we celebrate as a city council. but I'm just gonna tell you the kind of the backside of what we see and the results of how it impacts us. So the hotel industry has probably, I'd say doubled in the last 10 years in our city. Just in the last 2 years, we've seen over a 200% increase in calls for service at our hotels, which is a huge impact on this. We're seeing human trafficking, fraud, disturbances, gun manufacturing, that's happened twice, and a number of vehicle burglaries at these locations. So they are great for the city, and they're 98% occupied. We're like one of the second in the nation in occupancy rates. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is an impact on our resources, and that's all I want to point out as far as that goes. The hospital, we are the medical hub, we like to say. University Health Sciences, we got a future VA hospital coming into town. We have a lot of great things going on. But the hospital is in our top 5 calls for service locations. A lot of people come into our city from outside the city, from other departments that are bringing people into our city. And when they get released, then it becomes a problem for us. And this is one of our top locations for calls for service. I love the hospital. We have a great relationship. We meet with their executive board quarterly. So I'm not bashing on them. I'm just saying it is an impact on us. Department of Social Services, we truly don't know the impact. It's a huge buildings over there. They haven't all been occupied. Our calls for service are increasing currently. We're monitoring that, but as that fully gets built out and filled, we'll kind of see how that plays out. But I just want to point this as another one that we're watching and to see how the impacts go as it gets filled up. So retention.
Chief, I was just going to add, I think the hospital comment, the other thing I think it's worth noting is of those calls to the hospital, I would bet the number of mental health related calls have increased, and those are harder, longer stays for police officers, so it's sort of a volume and a plus length of the call, and I think it's been really hard on, I know Clovis PD, but in every police department, so I wanted to, it's more complicated than just calls for service, so they broke into a car, they got mad at their family, but I think those mental health calls have been a huge challenge for hospitals, for police departments. So I just wanted to point that out about the calls that you're getting from hospitals are not all disturbances or those kinds of things.
Yeah, typically when we go, some officers will spend hours and hours there and stuck at the hospital. So yeah, it's a huge impact. Retention, this one's should be a red flag. It's a red flag for me. It should be a red flag for everybody. We have never had an issue with retention at our department. Just this year, we've had 11% of our department has resigned or retired. Over half of that 11% is resignations. People going to other lines of work, other departments, not just leaving the profession or our department necessarily not to go to law enforcement. About half of them have been resignations to other agencies. And that is not, Clovis PD, that's not what we've experienced in the past. That number truly would be 13%. I had a couple of additional officers that were going to retire this year that I had them stay on. I kind of coaxed them into staying on and put them into a different position to help us recruit and hire additional officers in the department until they can kind of fill their replacements, and then they can go on and retire. But the number is staggering to have 13% of our department retire in a year. And a lot of this is directly related to, you could say, the professional law enforcement hits we've taken the last couple of years, but I also think it has, because we're so focused on supporting patrol and the overtime that's coming out related to patrol, there's limited opportunities for officers to do other things in our department. It's patrol, and the few special units, they're dwindling as the years go on. And so if you have aspirations of doing other things in your law enforcement career, maybe people are starting to see maybe Clovis isn't where I need to be. And so that's definitely a concern for me, a concern for our department. Another big concern for me is 26% of our department will be of retirement age in the next 5 years. Currently 10% is of retirement age. So over the next 5 years, that's a quarter of the department I'm gonna have to potentially replace. This year alone, we have hired 14, so we are doing good. And I think if given the opportunity, we could hire, we can find the people. We've been working hard and doing that. So I just wanted to show you as a comparison. Earlier I said per capita is not the best judge, but this definitely tells you where we are. So this is a comparison of 64 cities, and so we are the 64. So comparing to 63 other cities that are over 100,000 in population, and we're number 62. So Elk Grove and Irvine are lower than us per capita. So that's how many officers per thousand in population. I did do a survey of just valley chiefs, just kind of want to see no matter what the population was. So from Madera to Visalia to C, and we're dead last in that ranking as well. And that's could be a city of 10,000, be a city of Visalia 100 and something thousand. It didn't matter, but per capita rating, we were at the lowest in the valley. So if nothing changes, and we continue down the path we're on, these are kind of things that we're looking at potentially cutting. I guess I missed the spot. I wanted to cover something to talk about this, but Tim in his study on a page, I have it written down, but I'm off my notes here, pointed out that there's really three things to have a proactive department. You either have to reduce the calls of service you're going to, reduce the time you spend on calls, or you need to increase your staffing. So we, over the last 15 years, have reallocated our staffing and reduced the calls that we're going to and reduce the time we're spending on it. So these are some of the things we're looking at going forward. Our alarm responses and animal calls are some of our top 2 calls that we respond to. And some other cities throughout the state have gone to an alarm response that will come out a couple times, and then we're not coming anymore unless you get home and your house has been broken into and respond, or if it's a panic alarm in your home and you're calling for help, obviously we're going to respond. But there's a lot of departments throughout the state that they've gone after this because it's such a high call volume that we respond to. Animal complaints is another quality of life issue that we might need to start cutting back on the response on. Our youth diversion is kind of our last part of our youth services that was cut out that we still have, potentially could be cut going forward. And then our non-injury traffic collisions, that's something we cut in 2008 when the market crashed. We stopped going to those non-injury accidents, and the public was not happy. So we started going back to them, but that's something that we're considering because it's a huge call volume. Planning neighborhood services maybe is reducing that unit down to 1 more and just having 2 dedicated to that. Exploring online reporting, we really don't know if that's a benefit or if it helps in reducing the call volume. And then retail theft, a lot of our calls go into some of the larger retailers in town, take up a lot of our time. Is if it's more of a civil issue, they can identify the person as maybe we don't respond to those calls. So those are things we're considering. It's not saying that we're going to do those, but as we go down this path, these are things that we need to consider. And then our traffic unit, we're down to 2. Potentially in the future is just eliminating the unit altogether and put those two bodies into patrol. I know they're not going to like that if they're here, especially. So what we need, I'll just put it out there. We need 32 officers. And that's today, and 16 of those officers would go to patrol, and 16 of those officers would go to staff and make whole those other positions in the department that have been kind of vacated to supplement patrol. The 8 CSOs, community service officers, 4 of them would go to patrol, 3 would go to a municipal enforcement unit, so we have a CDBG funded position, grant funded. So we'd add 1 more, or 3 additional, so we'd have 4 that are strictly focused on quality of life issues, municipal enforcement in our city to get things back to where they need to be. And then the last one, we'd like to put into investigations to help out with that side of the house. So over the next 5 years, as our city continues to grow at I think a 2.5% growth rate over the last 5 years, if we kind of estimate that out, it puts us about 138,000 population. We're gonna need another 18 officers to grow as the city grows. So we're really looking at 50 officers, those 8 CSOs, and then as the department grows, we would need additional dispatchers and a couple animal control officers that are on there. So how much does this cost is a big question, and so just breaking out, this is strictly for these staff positions. It's $9.2 million just in staffing costs for the positions. That doesn't include equipment, clerical staff, administrative staff, or this is strictly for those bodies to be put on the street and back into investigations.
I presume that's an annual figure, is that right?
After 5 years, it would be annual at that point, yes. It would ramp up until that 5th year, then every year it's going to be an additional 9.2 to the budget.
I guess I need to understand that more clearly. So it's, in order to get to 50 more officers, we need how much money over the next 5 years?
So it's 9.2 annually. But what I'm saying is we're not going to hire, we need to likely hire 15 officers a year for the next 15 years to get to that.
Okay.
So it's good, the cost is going to increase over those 5-year period of time, but the final number after the 5 years is going to be 9.2 annually to fund those additional positions.
So, but you're not saying that $9.2 million gets us 15 officers per year, are you?
No. I'm saying 50 officers, 8 CSOs, 5 dispatchers, and 2 animal control officers. That 9.2 will pay for their salaries. But we're not going to have them all day one, is what I'm saying. So if you gave it to me today and said you can hire those 50 officers, it's going to take me 5 years to hire those 50 officers. So we would increase the budget over a 5-year period of time to get to that 9.2 additional funding.
All right, I'm going to wait for the rest of your presentation because I'm still not clear on that, but maybe it's clarified.
No, I'm pretty much done, so. So I was just going to close with, Clovis is a way of life, and I think Bill coming in here to listen to Smith Camp has another room, and he talked about Clovis is definitely a way of life, and it's a unique department, a unique city, a unique community. I definitely know that the city council understands the importance of public safety and the effects that it has on the community. I just wanted to come tonight as the chief, tell you where we're at, where we've come. We've never recovered from the economic downturn over the last 15 years. I want the community to know where we're at. And I really want to have a discussion on what's the best path forward. I'm obviously going to work with whatever I'm given, but I'm just letting you know that there's a result of what, based on what I'm given, of what services I can provide. So I just want to turn it over to the council and avail for any questions, and I'm hoping we can have a discussion about where you guys think we should be or where we should head.